A wave of major developments is reshaping the battlefield and global diplomacy at the same time. New strikes have shattered key elements of Russia's military industry, while unexpected incidents across Europe are raising fresh alarm among Ukraine's partners. Behind closed doors, the pressure around potential peace negotiations is intensifying, with new demands, hidden disagreements, and growing tension between the world's power centers. Meanwhile, Ukraine's forces continue to achieve results that Moscow can no longer ignore, and even Russia's closest allies are quietly turning those dependencies into painful leverage. Stay tuned, all the details in our special edition of Hotspot. The most recent developments surrounding the potential peace negotiations are unfolding rapidly, with new political signals emerging from both Kyiv's partners and Moscow's representatives. Behind the scenes, diplomats are quietly testing red lines, recalibrating demands, and probing whether the latest proposals can survive the pressure of global scrutiny. All of these hidden dynamics, fresh reactions, and shifting priorities, we break them down in detail in our latest report.
No restrictions for the armed forces of Ukraine, no ban on joining NATO, and much more. The so-called Trump plan in its original form no longer exists. According to the Financial Times, it has been cut by almost a third, but the details have not yet been disclosed.
As of now, after Geneva, there are fewer points, no longer 28, and many important things have been taken into account in this framework. There is still work for all of us to do together. It's very difficult to create the final document, and everything must be done properly. And we appreciate that most of the world is ready to help us, and the American side is taking a constructive approach.
Sources informed about the course of the negotiations report. The parties have agreed to continue discussing only issues related to bilateral relations between Ukraine and the United States. Separate topics should be addressed in other formats. After all, the initial draft of the document included nuances that did not depend on Ukraine at all. Now, by presenting a united front, Europe and Ukraine have decided to discuss their respective issues with the United States, while taking each other's interests into account.
This partnership not only allows us to act together, but it also shows that our shared interests essentially create a strong foundation for joint action.
At the same time, to prevent leaks after the meeting, no copies of the new peace agreement were handed out, according to Ukraine's First Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kislysya. All copies of the document agreed upon in Geneva were collected from everyone except the heads of delegations. Nevertheless, some details still managed to leak to the press at the level of rumors. For example, there was a clear refusal to reduce the number of Ukrainian armed forces at Moscow's insistence.
Our European partners made it absolutely clear that Ukraine's sovereignty is not up for discussion at all, and any limitations or restrictions on the military or on Ukraine's ability to join any alliance are also not subject to negotiation. And from this point of view, it's clear that demands such as, for example, amending the constitution of Ukraine to prohibit joining NATO will be dropped. And I think these are the main important points.
Another crucial point for Ukraine was the discussion of security guarantees. According to analysts, the representatives from Washington managed to convey that such commitments from Russia mean absolutely nothing. Therefore, the only real guarantees can be agreements with the US and Europe, as well as the unhindered development of the defense industry within Ukraine itself. And here for the first time, it was stated that these are guarantees not only for Ukraine, but for the entire continent.
Importantly, in Europe, there are currently ongoing discussions about guaranteeing peace through strength. In other words, European countries are now officially and openly saying that we must be prepared to fight against Russia, including on Ukrainian territory, if, after the signing of a peace agreement, Russia violates the agreements. At this particular moment, it seems to me, really represents a tectonic shift, because previously, such things were simply never discussed at all.
At the same time, the White House believes that the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine were productive, but a few disagreements remain, said White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre following the meeting. She also said in an interview with Fox News that arms supplies to Ukraine have their limits and cannot be endless, subtly hinting at what might happen to US support if Kyiv pushes its position too aggressively. However, even when it comes to weapons, things are far from straightforward.
It is Europe that is buying American weapons for Ukraine. They are actually buying them. And from this perspective, Trump's repeated threats to stop supplying military weapons to Ukraine would in fact violate agreements not only with Ukraine, but also with Europe.
and losing multi-billion-dollar contracts and having to pay penalties for breaking them is clearly not what Donald Trump is counting on. Meanwhile, the American delegation is already in Abu Dhabi, where several days of meetings will be held with the Russian side. Russia will be presented with a peace plan that was agreed upon on Sunday between the US and Ukraine. According to experts, given that Moscow previously stated that they hadn't seen anything and needed to look into the matter, this time the Kremlin also doesn't seem particularly inclined toward constructive dialogue.
But this gives the Russian Federation the opportunity to build a system in which they won't even, so to speak, engage with or consider this plan. In doing so, they are trying to keep the initiative on their side and avoid getting drawn into this negotiation process. Because getting involved would essentially mean playing by someone else's rules, by the rules of Kyiv, Europe, Washington. Moscow, again, does not want to be in a position where it is being led and is perceived primarily by the United States as the main obstacle to achieving peace.
However, as analysts say, no one really expects that Putin will agree to terms acceptable to Europe without pressure. And this pressure should primarily come from Washington. This means that the main task is to convince the United States that the peace plan should be exactly this way.
Judging by the fact that the negotiations did not drag on and ended with a friendly dinner, these are clear signals and signs that everything went more than positively, more than well. But we also know the rather complicated character of Steve Witkoff, a man who is both extremely wealthy and extremely capricious equally so. He would never have agreed, even just for the sake of politeness, to simply have dinner and spend his time if he felt that the results of their negotiations did not satisfy him.
Meanwhile, to ensure that Trump himself would not deviate from the course of peaceful settlement agreed upon at the meeting, the closest friends of the American leader in European politics flew to Washington. Finnish President Alexander Stubb and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who have already demonstrated more than once that they know how to find an approach to Donald Trump.
4 Russian drones entered the airspace of Moldova and Romania. President Volodymyr Zelensky outlined the consequences of Russia's latest massive strike on Ukraine and urged the international community to increase pressure on Moscow. Meanwhile, the situation on the front line remains extremely tense. Fierce fighting continues, enemy forces are attempting new breakthroughs, and Ukraine's defense forces are holding their ground under constant assault. All the details are in our full military briefing.
One of the longest and most massive attacks since the start of the full-scale war. That's how the head of the Krasnodar region, Veniamin Kondratiev, described the overnight attack on his region. Drones also targeted the Russian city of Taganrog in the Rostov region. An aircraft manufacturing plant was attacked there. The Ukrainian General Staff confirmed the destruction of a Russian experimental A-60 aircraft, as well as a drone manufacturing facility.
This aircraft is equipped with laser equipment, and it is the only one of its kind in the Russian aerospace forces. That is why this is an unprecedentedly successful strike by Ukraine's defense forces on legitimate military targets on the territory of the occupying country.
In addition, in Novorossiysk, Russia, there was a strike on an oil terminal. Stenders and a launcher from an S-400 air defense missile system warehouse were hit. The Tuapse oil refinery was also struck.
Let me remind you of the tactical and technical characteristics of the bars. It has a range of about 700 kilometers for hitting targets and a warhead weighing from 50 to 100 kilograms. The long-range Neptune has a target engagement range of about 1,000 kilometers. Therefore, striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation is further proof of the successful work of the Ukrainian defense industry.
It is also unsafe in the Russian digital space. Ukrainian hackers broke into the alert system in the Krasnodar region, which resulted in the activation of chemical and radiation alarms there.
Thoroughly disinfect residential premises and ensure you have stocked up on drinking water and food supplies.
Instead of defending their own regions, the Russian army was firing at Ukrainians. A video appeared online showing at least 8 caliber missiles being launched from Novorossiysk towards Ukraine.
There they go, flying. The 8th one is off. Look, there they go, flying. Look!
At the same time, the Russians attacked residential buildings where peaceful people were sleeping. The president of Ukraine stated that the enemy struck several regions of our country, but the epicenter was Kyiv. According to him, the occupiers sent more than 460 drones into Ukraine, 4 of which entered Moldova and Romania.
Such attacks, not only on Ukrainian territory, but also on the territories of Moldova and Romania, should undoubtedly be regarded as a tactic by the Russian Federation to raise the stakes during the time of major international meetings.
The situation along the line of contact remains tense. The occupying army is trying to break through in Pokrovsk.
Ukrainian defense forces managed to carry out a sweep practically in the city center. This refers to the successful actions of Ukrainian assault units in the area of the Pokrovsk Pedagogical College, Soborny Square, and the railway station. In addition, the Ukrainian defense forces expanded their zone of presence both in Pokrovsk itself and accordingly carried out a series of successful counterattacks.
The defenders on the Kupiansk front are not allowing the occupiers to break through the Ukrainian defenses. Here, the Russians are trying to break through with small assault groups, but the Ukrainian armed forces immediately stop them. Our defenders are employing an active defense tactic on the Zaporizhzhia front and seize every opportunity to launch counterattacks.
China is squeezing Russia for everything it can. With sanctions severely restricting Moscow's access to foreign imports, Chinese suppliers have sharply increased prices on goods destined for Russia's military-industrial sector. Fully aware of the Kremlin's dependence on these supply chains, Chinese exporters are exploiting the situation to the fullest. According to the study by the Bank of Finland's Institute for Emerging Economies, the cost of Chinese products under export control has surged by an average of 87% for Russian buyers. A deeper look at how China is effectively stripping Russia down to the bone coming up next.
China is betraying Russia. Yes, you heard that right. Beijing masterfully pretends to be a partner, but in reality it uses Moscow as the weak link.
And in our language, there's a phrase that has become a saying: the Russian and the Chinese are brothers forever.
But here's what's interesting. Recently, Xi spoke on the phone with Trump and stated that he supports the United States' peaceful efforts to resolve the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It sounds nice in words, but what about in practice?
I think that China has sent a political signal to the United States, indicating that it is closely monitoring what is happening in terms of peaceful regulation and the search for peaceful solutions in the Russian-Ukrainian war. The main point, or rather, the central point of this signal should be as follows. Russia absolutely must not win this war, and accordingly, Ukraine must not lose. But
here's something else. The leaders of the countries have agreed on visits, and Trump is planning to go to China as early as April.
Whether Trump will be able to reach the desired trade agreement with China, specifically in April, for example, during a potential meeting in Beijing, is a big question. Nothing deeper than that, in my opinion, especially regarding the end of the Russia-Ukraine war. There is nothing about these dates. April 2026, a meeting between Xi Jinping and Trump in Beijing, that goes beyond that.
But what is China doing wrong in relation to Russia? It seems like everything is fine. The thing is, China is making a lot of money off Russia. The prices of export goods supplied to Russia have increased by an average of 87%.
Relations between Russia and China have always been very complicated. And if we think they are friends, no, there's actually a good word for this. They are fellow travelers. Russia and China are fellow travelers. A weak Russia is beneficial to China. A weak Putin is beneficial to China. It's advantageous for China to buy raw materials cheaply and then sell goods to the Russian Federation at a very high price. Russia really has no other way out, for the most part.
And it's not just about goods. China is gradually moving into Russian regions, thereby gaining access to territories and resources.
You know, there are already examples in the Far East where small settlements have become predominantly Chinese, and now they even participate in municipal elections there.
Russia, in turn, is becoming increasingly dependent on China.
And does Putin find such a relationship acceptable? Again, of course not. Of course he doesn't. Well, because Putin has phantom pains about the Soviet Union. Basically, throughout his presidency, he has tried to restore some kind of former greatness. He calls himself the gatherer of Russian lands. But in reality, he is simply leading the Russian Federation to ruin, to complete, absolute ruin, to financial bankruptcy.
Beijing is increasingly strengthening its influence in Central Asia, while pushing Moscow into the background, which likely cannot help but worry the old man in the Kremlin. It is necessary.
to unwaveringly strengthen the friendship between China and Kazakhstan, to make joint efforts to promote comprehensive cooperation, and to do more to contribute to peace in the region and the world, as well as to the development of stability and positive energy in Chinese-Kazakh relations. So, the main question is, what exactly drives China? A reliable partnership with Russia.
Our close and ongoing communication truly reflects the strategic nature of Russian-Chinese relations, which are at an unprecedentedly high level.
Or is Beijing simply taking advantage of the situation and acting in its own interests?
They are not interested in the Russian Federation winning this war. Because if Putin wins this war, he restores his geopolitical agency. He starts talking to all the players, for example, with the United States and China, on an equal footing, which is absolutely not in line with China's strategic interests. Yes, this position is covert.
China talks about friendship, but only acts when it benefits them. It profits from Russia, strengthens its own influence, and at the same time builds relations with the US. And Moscow is becoming increasingly dependent on Beijing's decisions.
An unprecedented success for Ukraine's defense forces. A critically important military factory, one of the key facilities powering Putin's war machine and responsible for producing components for missiles and drones, has been blown up in a precise strike. The explosion caused massive destruction, halted operations at the plant, and delivered a serious blow to Russia's ability to sustain high-intensity warfare. While Russian officials are scrambling to downplay the damage, emerging reports point to expansive losses in equipment, stockpiles, and infrastructure. All the details of this high-impact operation in our full report.
Key Russian military and energy facilities have come under attack. In just one strike, the Russians lost an aircraft repair plant, a drone manufacturing facility, an oil terminal, an oil refinery, an S-400 air defense system, and as the cherry on top, an experimental A-60 laser aircraft, which Russia will no longer be able to recreate.
The blaze is so intense, God forbid, the glow looks as if it were after a nuclear explosion.
Residents of Taganrog witnessed this glow. It was a very hot night there on Monday going into Tuesday, especially in the area of the Beriev aircraft repair plant. The enterprise specializes in the development, serial production, modernization, and repair of amphibious aircraft and special-purpose aviation complexes, in particular the A-50 long-range airborne early warning and control aircraft. The aircraft plant also carries out major repairs of Russian aviation aircraft and upgrades of the Tu-95 MSM strategic missile-carrying bombers. Next to the Enterprise is the main test base of this plant, the Taganrog Yuzhny military airfield. Rare examples of Russian aviation equipment are stored at this location.
Yes, an aircraft.
More precisely, rare examples of Russian aviation equipment used to be stored here. At the airbase, the A-60 aircraft, also known as the Flying Laboratory, was hit. The aircraft was intended for testing laser weapons. This is a Soviet development. The project was developed in the 1970s. As part of the USSR's strategy to create anti-satellite laser weapons, the aircraft is distinguished by a distinctive hump. It is in this hump that a 1-megawatt laser installation is located. The idea was that this laser could either jam the optical devices of enemy satellites or even damage their sensors and other equipment. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the project was frozen, but the Russians resurrected it and spent years trying to bring it back to life. At the same time, they never forgot to threaten the world with their so-called unparalleled weapon.
The Russian army will soon be equipped with Star Wars-style weapons capable of burning the enemy both on the ground and in the air.
The Soviets developed only 2 such aircraft, so the destruction of one of them is not just a painful blow to Putin's ambitions, but a devastating one. The Russians will no longer be able to recreate their flying laboratory, and the Z-Patriots know this as well.
Protective shelters, relocation, never heard of such things. It will soon be 4 years since the start of the special military operation. Idiotic internet shutdowns didn't help against enemy UAVs, which are controlled in part by satellite communication systems, nor did they prevent local residents from filming the strikes. Probably an effective measure would have been to relocate the aircraft from a region that is under enemy UAV attacks almost every day. But
it's not at all certain that these were drone strikes. The Ukrainian General Staff stated that they used Bars drones and Neptune cruise missiles to strike Russian strategic targets. Whoa, there it is.
It's coming in, okay, right now. It hit the building right into it. That was a hell of an impact, seriously. That was incredible, damn.
During the strike on Taganrog, the Molnia UAV manufacturing facility by Land Arrow was also hit. Fires have been reported at the site according to the military. But it's not just about Taganrog. Explosions were also heard en masse in the Krasnodar region. Strikes targeted the Sheskharis oil terminal in Novorossiysk and the Tuapse oil refinery. In Novorossiysk, oil tankers and one of the S-400 air defense system launchers were damaged, according to the General Staff. The extent of the damage is being clarified.
The West is increasingly preparing for the possibility of a direct confrontation with Russia, and the signals are becoming louder. Poland, in particular, has already acknowledged that a potential Kremlin advance toward Warsaw is no longer a distant hypothetical scenario, but a realistic threat. At the same time, the United Kingdom and France are issuing a series of high-profile statements reinforcing the message that Europe must be ready for any escalation. Their governments are openly discussing defense readiness, new security measures, and deeper military coordination. All the details coming up next.
A war between Western countries and Russia is becoming increasingly likely.
As I analyze the facts, I come to the conclusion that a war between Europe and Russia is becoming more and more apparent. This is not just empty talk. Everyone is preparing for it.
The buildup of military equipment, the strengthening of borders, and the increase in defense budgets. All of this is to be able to confront the Kremlin in a few years.
In 3 or 4 years, we may face a kind of test of our resilience. It is already manifesting itself in hybrid forms, but it could become much harsher.
For now, all Russia is capable of is testing the patience of NATO countries. For example, these are, let's say, the accidental incursions of Russian drones into various countries, including Poland. After the recent sabotage of the railway, the Polish authorities announced the launch of a new operation called Horizon to protect critical infrastructure from sabotage.
Most likely this only concerns the territories bordering Ukraine and Belarus. Most likely, well, that is not more than that. But again, well, 10,000 people. What are we talking about here? Well, that's not much. It's a very small number. Our entire border service is about 40,000 people.
As part of the operation, Poland plans to use not only manpower, but also military equipment, mobile security systems, and reconnaissance complexes.
These crossings, additional personnel for guarding infrastructure facilities, training in first aid and tactical medicine, all of this is actually relevant. This really should have been done about 2 years ago. Well, only now are they getting around to it. Well, better late than never, at least they're doing it now. That country out of the entire alliance is the one that spends the most money on purchasing all kinds of weaponry. In other words, over the past few years, they've really made a big leap in buying all sorts of weapons, American, European, and even South Korean.
Warsaw has also launched a program to train citizens in basic safety skills, from first aid to actions in emergency situations.
The Baltic countries have been living in this mode for quite some time already. They've been studying tactical medicine for a long time now. As for drones, it seems that things aren't really progressing for them in that area. But, once again, this is a normal story, something that should be the case for all countries that understand and feel that sooner or later the Russian Federation will come to them.
And Britain and France have already decided which specific units will be sent to Ukraine. But what is clear is that this will happen after a peace agreement.
Their numbers will be minimal. That is, the number, most likely we're talking about, well, 10 to 15,000 people from each country. But again, that's a very small number, very small. They won't be able to do anything. Our active front line with the Russian Federation is 1,250 kilometers long. 1,250? For a peacekeeping mission, that number is definitely not enough.
Nevertheless, any military preparations by the West are not exactly to the Kremlin's liking.
They are forcing themselves to further increase their military budgets. Some countries, like Poland, have already brought it up to almost 5%. Other countries are not going down this path, even though it is killing their economies.
But here's the main question. How ready are European countries really to stand up to the Kremlin right now? And how much more time do they need to prepare?
Germany needs, as they told me, at least another 2 years just to get their army into some kind of order. At least 2 years. Ideally 5 years. ideally. Well, 5 to 7, that's what they said. 5 to 7 years, ideally. At least 2, but not less than 2. Because it's not just about shells, not just about tanks. Of course, it's about money, allocations, placing orders, starting to assemble equipment. It's about people.
From time to time, NATO countries openly showcase new types of weaponry, reminding the Kremlin of their capabilities.
Turkey has unveiled its first unmanned fighter jet, the Bayraktar Kizilelma, which is now equipped with national weaponry. The United States is launching the development of a new fighter jet, the F-47. According to Trump, the F-47 will feature a new level of stealth.
And Germany is even preparing Bundeswehr soldiers to practice actions in the event of the worst-case scenario. Europe is gradually ramping up its preparations and strengthening its defenses. This situation is clearly not in the Kremlin's favor, since at any moment Russia could face an unexpected pushback.
At this moment, that's all from me, Maria Farafonova. Even more hellish frontline news in our next episode. But for now, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon!